One of the big questions that any potential or current EV owner will always ask when going fully electric is, how long will the battery last? And that comes twofold, day to day and then over the years. It's a reasonable question to ask since the technology powering EVs is so new to most people, and it has already advanced so much in a relatively short period of time. When fully electric cars were first entering the market, there was a lot of doubt regarding their overall longevity. EVs have really proven themselves since then, but there's still a lot of scaremongering around the topic that doesn't help to give consumers confidence. It's true that these batteries can be very expensive if they need replacing, but at the end of the day, how much do you really have to worry about that happening? Today we're going to break down some of the misconceptions around EV longevity by looking at some real-world examples of just how long these cars can last. We'll also discuss average EV lifespans, the longest lasting cars on the road, the future of EV batteries, some 300,000-mile Teslas, as well as the latest controversies with these cars. So there's a lot to discuss here, let's get into it. To start, let's take a look at how long the batteries are lasting for the most popular EV brand, Tesla. Tesla has the most EVs on the road of any manufacturer, and has been making cars for well over a decade at this point, so they have the most available data. In that time, Tesla has made a few different models over the years, and their battery tech has changed a lot as well. With that in mind, this data should be understood more generally, since there are a lot of factors that may not reflect every person's experience. Back in 2020, Tesla released their first public data on the battery longevity of their oldest mainstream vehicles, the Model S and X. At the time, the Model 3 and Y were still fairly new and hadn't been on the road for very long, so the data wasn't really in on those particular cars. So while these numbers are useful to look at, it's important to recognize that it comes from only their first 8 years of making mass-market consumer vehicles. These cars and their underlying technology have changed quite a bit since their initial production, so it's good to keep in mind that a lot of the data is only from Tesla's oldest vehicles. The biggest thing we can glean from this report is the fact that the average battery capacity for the Model S and X stayed remarkably consistent over the first 200,000 miles. Users saw the first and fastest signs of degradation within the first 25,000 miles of ownership, about a 5% drop in that time. After that, though, the next 5% capacity was generally lost between the 125 to 150,000 mile mark. Only after 200,000 miles do we start to see the average remaining capacity drop into the 85% range. Of course, there are always going to be outlier vehicles that don't fare as well over the same distance, but most cars fall within a standard deviation of this line. Conversely, some may see longevity even better than the average, but you shouldn't necessarily expect it. In their 2022 impact report, Tesla released updated data on the Model S and X, and the numbers this time looked even better. At 200,000 miles, Tesla estimates that the average Model S or X will have only lost around 12% of its original battery capacity. In 2024, the Model 3 and Y had finally been on the road long enough to have sufficient data regarding longevity. While these cars don't seem to have the same lasting capacity as the Model S and X, they still are holding quite well on their own. Like the other models, the Model 3 and Y see their biggest capacity drop pretty early on. These cars tend to lose their first 10% of capacity, somewhere between 60 to 80,000 miles. From then until 200,000 miles, these vehicles saw their batteries degrade much slower, with the average sitting around 85% of its original capacity. With this data, we do have to note a few important details. For one, this data is only for the long-range trims of those vehicles using their NCA or NCM battery chemistries. This data doesn't include standard range vehicles, any LFP-type battery cells, or their internally developed 4680 cells. Once again, we also have to keep in mind that this is just an average. Inside EVs estimates that, with a standard distribution, nearly 68% of vehicles will fall comfortably within the standard deviation of that range. So this means that while most will probably sit at around 85% capacity at 200,000 miles, there will be some who are closer to 90% capacity, and others who might be sub 80%. Like I mentioned a minute ago, if we directly compare the degradation curves on the Model S and X with the Model 3 and Y, then we can see that the Model S and X are actually tending to hold up a bit better longer. For the Model 3 and Y, which use 2170 cells instead of 18650, we can see that they see a steeper range loss early in ownership and then generally maintain a lower overall capacity. After that initial drop, though, both sets of vehicles flatten out pretty quickly and don't lose much additional range very quickly. We can't say that exactly accounts for this discrepancy because there are a lot of factors at play. That includes the different ways that these cars are being driven, the actual battery cells and their chemistry, thermal management, their initial capacity, and the many design changes that these cars have seen over the years, along with charging. Differences aside, all of Tesla's models are seeing great ranges even after 200,000 miles on the road, and many probably have even more longevity ahead of them. Tesla has talked many times before about the fact that their battery packs are designed to last even longer than the cars themselves. Elon Musk has said that these cars are designed to commercial vehicle standards, and that the battery packs should last between 300 to 500,000 miles. It's best to always take some of Elon Musk's predictions with a pinch of salt, but at the very least it shows that Tesla is seriously thinking about the lifespan of their vehicles. As a point of reference, Tesla's own internal research found that the average internal combustion engine is scrapped after 200,000 miles in the US and 150,000 miles in Europe. EV critics are very quick to point out the environmental toll of battery production, and while there is definitely a conversation to be had there, if a Tesla vehicle can last over twice as long as an ICE vehicle, that is definitely a point in their favor. Then of course those batteries can be recycled and you can charge from sustainable sources that will get cleaner over time, but that's for another video. There are a ton of different stories out there from owners about the longevity, or in some cases lack thereof, for their Tesla vehicles. One owner recently shared his story on the Tesla High Mileage Club on Facebook of a 2018 long-range Model 3 running strong with over 300,000 miles on its original battery and drive units. At the time of posting, the odometer read 316,270 miles, and according to the owner, it had still only lost 15% of its original battery capacity. This means that this car is over 100,000 miles ahead of Tesla's own internal estimates and had not lost any additional battery capacity. The owner had very few maintenance problems with this car over the years, saving a lot of money that might otherwise have been spent on repairing a vehicle. A pretty common story that you hear from a lot of Tesla owners is just how much money they are saving by not having to perform standard ICE vehicle maintenance. EVs in general have a lot fewer moving parts than a traditional car and generally require a lot less maintenance to keep running. In the last example, if that owner had an ICE vehicle and gotten an oil change every 5,000 miles at an average price of $50, which is actually fairly low and conservative, that would work out to over $3,000 in savings over ownership. The most common replacements include suspension components and HVAC filters, but battery and motor issues remain rare even past 250,000 miles. Another commonly cited extra expense that comes with owning an EV is an increased cost of tires. There's a lot of conflicting data here, but many EV owners report having to change tires on their electric cars more frequently. When the average cost of a set of 4 tires sits at around $1,000, that is a pretty big expense that can add up quickly if you do truly have to replace them more often, and tire prices do go up from there. While some owners do report having to get their tires changed more regularly, here's a great example of a long-lasting Tesla that defies a lot of conceptions around EVs. Last year, one owner shared their personal experience with their 6-year-old Model 3 that had just ticked over 200,000 miles driven on the original battery. In the first 100,000 miles, the owner saw an approximate 11 to 12% drop in total battery capacity. Over the subsequent 100,000 miles, there was a minimal noticeable drop in capacity on top of that original degradation. This degradation is very much in line with Tesla's own data, which shows a steeper degradation in the beginning and then a more gradual drop afterwards. This particular car has a 78 kilowatt-hour battery, of which 75 kilowatt-hours are actually usable. Over those 6 years of ownership, the usable battery capacity had decreased to 66 kilowatt-hours. Inside EVs estimates that this car's range likely dropped from a maximum of 310 miles down to just 270, which is still very usable. As far as tires go, though, this owner reported that his had lasted around 40 to 50,000 miles of range, which is in line with the average life expectancy of normal tires. Another layer to this story that makes it interesting for our topic today is the manner in which this car was regularly charged. One of the most common pieces of advice that you will hear regarding EVs is to minimize how often you use DC fast chargers. It has been widely reported for a long time that using those fast chargers places additional stress on the battery unit and can prematurely degrade it if you do it all the time. According to this owner, however, he rarely ever plugged in at home, with over 95% of his charge time spent at superchargers. Beyond individual anecdotal evidence, there has been a lot of conflicting reports on this particular issue. Some studies even claim that supercharging has little to no impact on battery degradation in the long run. There are a ton of factors that impact how long your Tesla's battery will last and continue to perform, but common wisdom says that if you can avoid using superchargers all the time, then it might be better for the long-term health of your battery. On the other hand, stories like these show that supercharging may not be as harmful as some had suspected. Here's another great example of a high-mileage Tesla that puts it directly up against a nearly brand new model. In this comparison, we have two Model 3s from 2022, one with 2,995 miles driven and another with 217,500 miles. This second model was driven very hard as a taxi, where it also racked up a lot of hours spent charging at superchargers. Conversely, the other Model 3 was clearly rarely driven and had very few charge cycles put through its battery pack. Over the course of its short life, the high-mileage vehicle still only lost about 11% of its original capacity. That's a remarkably consistent degree of energy storage, especially given how hard this car was driven in such a short time. And it points to the fact that degradation also has to do with time, just the amount of time this battery has existed. As for the other vehicle, though, we can see that age alone doesn't have a huge impact on the health of the battery. Even after 3 years of ownership, this car still had 99.5% of its original capacity. So while most EVs see their biggest capacity drop early in their lifespan, this seems to show that you still have to drive quite considerably in order to see those drops in range. The average American drives a bit over 13,000 miles per year, so even if you drive the average amount, you can still go many years without any significant drop in battery efficiency. All across the internet, there are tons of examples of Tesla vehicles with really impressive mileage. This Tesla Model S has over 430,000 miles on it and is still going strong on its original battery. And there are some with even more. It's pretty wild to see these examples since those are mileages that traditional cars would never dream of achieving. Some of these examples are particularly impressive since they are working with their original battery packs. There's a leaderboard of people who are tracking high-mileage Teslas, and we can see one at over 1 million kilometers or 621,000 miles and growing. However, that particular model is no longer on its original battery pack. If we look at other posts on the Tesla High Mileage Club page, we can see there's an ever-growing list of examples of these cars. Members share photos of their odometers, repair history, and any tips for reaching those high mileages. So while there are clearly a lot of Tesla owners out there that have reported really long lifespans for their batteries, how did these numbers compare to the average ICE vehicle? I mentioned before that Tesla estimates the average gas-powered car is scrapped after just 200,000 miles in the US, but everyone has likely heard stories of cars lasting much longer than that. Someone has probably already commented that on this video. AutoTrader's data suggests that a well-maintained gas car can last between 200 to 300,000 miles. Of course, that is dependent on a number of factors like vehicle age, driving conditions, and the build quality of the car to begin with. It goes without saying, though, that reaching these high mileages is entirely dependent on how well you take care of your vehicle. Compared to an EV, a gas-powered car has a lot more moving parts and requires much more regular maintenance to stay in top condition. EVs may seem more high-tech, but at their core, they are much simpler machines that don't require much regular maintenance. So not only will this minimal maintenance save you money in the long term, it should be easier to hit these 200,000 plus mileage thresholds in an EV than it is in an ICE car. However, with all of that in mind, there has been a recent lawsuit brought against Tesla that casts some doubt over all of the high-mileage vehicles that we have seen so far. In April of 2025, one Tesla owner out of California initiated a class action lawsuit against Tesla, claiming that they vastly overestimate the readings on their in-vehicle odometers. He claims that rather than using accurate mileage readings, Tesla uses predictive algorithms that factor in energy usage and driving behavior to estimate miles driven. The plaintiff estimates that based on his typical driving habits and other vehicles, his Model Y odometer ran about 15% fast. This would have a big impact on potential resale value, and he alleges reduces warranty obligations and compels consumers to purchase extended warranties prematurely. For a time, his car said he drove about 72 miles per day when he claimed he drove no more than 20. If this turned out to be true, this would have huge implications for the company and its millions of vehicles sold. The problem does not seem to just be isolated to one driver, however. One owner out of Las Vegas uses her Model Y for infrequent trips to the grocery store and other errands, and she claims that her displayed mileage could be twice what she actually drove in that given period. There are many other owners reporting online going back several years that allege similar problems. In these cases, owners are worried that their cars are being pushed prematurely out of warranty and leaving customers with repair bills that Tesla should theoretically be covering. At the same time, this also has a huge impact on leased vehicles, since owners have annual mileage limits that they have to keep under during their lease period. Tesla and its legal team have denied all the allegations made in this lawsuit, with Elon Musk himself, of course, calling the lawsuit idiotic. While there are definitely plenty of reports from owners of inaccurate odometers, it's unclear how widespread this issue is and whether it's truly a systematic problem and not just faulty readings from some specific cars. Well-known Tesla hackers like Green believe that it's highly unlikely that if Tesla used a system like this to calculate mileage, that it wouldn't have been discovered so far. There are a ton of reports online from other Tesla drivers who claim accurate readings, and independent tests across multiple vehicles show that most Teslas are reporting mileage accurately. These people could very well be experiencing specific issues with their car's mileage, and that would require addressing for sure, but it remains to be seen if this is truly a systematic issue. If it is, this would probably be one of the biggest scandals in all of vehicle history. This is an absolutely huge claim to make against Tesla, which would implicate them in some major fraud, but as it stands right now, a lot of people aren't convinced by this lawsuit. We'll see how this lawsuit turns out, but for now, it's fair to assume that the mileage on any given Tesla vehicle is likely accurate. So while it's unlikely that Tesla is systematically speeding up the odometers on their vehicles to avoid paying out-of-warranty repairs, some people do wonder why their warranties are so low compared to the lifetime mileages that they talk about. Tesla and its executives have claimed over the years that they believe your vehicle's battery should outlast the vehicle itself. But their warranty is nowhere near as forgiving as that. Their battery warranties differ from vehicle to vehicle, but they all share some things in common between them. The battery and drive units for every one of their vehicles is guaranteed for a maximum of 8 years, or until you reach a mileage cap set for the vehicle, whichever comes first. For the Model S, X, and Cybertruck, they guarantee it for 150,000 miles, the long-range all-wheel drive and performance trims of the Model 3 and Y for 120,000 miles, and the rear-wheel drive Model 3 and Y for just 100,000 miles. At the end of the warranty period, for all of these vehicles, Tesla guarantees a 70% retention of the battery's original capacity. This is a decent warranty, given the industry as a whole, that really will cover most battery defects, as those are most likely to be a problem earlier in the car's life. Still, if Tesla is so confident that their vehicles will last 200,000 miles or more, why isn't that the lifespan covered by their warranty? A lot of customers have argued for a while that the battery should at least be covered up to the point that Tesla is claiming, or at the very least to meet the average. As it stands right now, the warranty will mostly just replace batteries that have clear and major defects. That's not necessarily an unreasonable policy to hold, but if Tesla extended their warranty, then it would do a lot to ease customer worries about the longevity of their batteries. Still, most customers can rest easy knowing that while the warranty number is a good minimum threshold for your battery's life, many customers have reported theirs lasting quite a bit longer. With that being said, not every battery replacement will happen under warranty, and a lot of owners want to know how much it will cost them to get a new battery. Since these vehicles are generally holding up so well, most of the batteries that have needed to be replaced fall under the vehicle's original warranty. Tesla is still a young company compared to most automakers, and most of their growth has occurred within the last few years, meaning that most of their cars probably haven't hit any of the caps of their warranties. As we see these cars start to age, though, we are getting a lot more data on how much these out-of-warranty battery replacements cost. While most owners will probably never have to replace the battery themselves, if it should come up, it can be expensive. When looking at the cost to repair your EV's battery, there are a lot of factors that can impact exactly what you will be paying. The prices of batteries in general have dropped over time, but they can still vary a lot depending on when you get them. In addition to that, changing the battery is not a trivial task, so you will have high labor costs to contend with as well. Last year, Recurrent Auto compiled a ton of owner data on the prices they paid to replace their batteries. They found, for example, that the battery unit for a Model S can cost somewhere between $12,000 to $15,000, and then labor costs can easily bring the total to upwards of $22,000. That's a really considerable price tag that starts to rival the cost of buying a lot of cheaper cars outright. Still, the Model S is a very expensive car in general, and since you will likely only have to replace the battery after 200,000 miles, but likely much higher than that in a lot of cases, it's not a crazy price to effectively double the vehicle's lifespan. For the Model 3, Recurrent estimates that a battery will cost somewhere around $13,500, with labor costs bringing the total to around $16,000. We can expect that these batteries will last about as long as we can see with the Model S, but that definitely is not always the case. Back in 2023, we had an outlier here, where there was a widely spread story of an Uber driver that had to replace a Model 3 battery after only 120,000 miles. This driver almost exclusively supercharged, multiple times a day, and almost always up to 100%, which, as we discussed, are all factors that can degrade your battery faster than usual. Still, 120,000 miles is a lot less than the 200,000 that Tesla claims this car should go, but was still not covered by the warranty. In the end, this owner had to pay about $9,000 to replace his battery, which is considerably less than what the average cost of this battery was just a few years prior. This goes to show that while Tesla battery prices are undoubtedly quite expensive, those costs are going down. Within just the last few years, we've also seen explosive growth in the industries that source materials and manufacture EV batteries all across the globe. This has led to plummeting battery prices across the board. Data from the US Department of Energy tells us that in the earlier days of the technology in 2008, EV battery prices had a high of $1,415 per kilowatt hour of energy storage. Since then, prices have dropped by about 90%. At the end of 2023, Goldman Sachs released their analysis on EV price trends and found huge price drops across the board. In 2019, the average cost of an EV battery pack sat at around $170 per kilowatt hour. By the end of 2023, when this report was published, it had fallen down to about $150 per kilowatt hour. They went on to predict that by sometime in 2025, this year, they anticipate the price of batteries to drop down to a low of $99 per kilowatt hour. That would be a 40% decline from prices in 2022, when previously only a 33% decline was expected. Battery prices are not only falling, but the rapid growth in production means that they are falling even faster than anticipated. Battery prices are dropping considerably, and the huge growth to the industry means they will probably drop even further and faster. From there, Goldman Sachs expects battery prices to fall by an approximate 11% per year until at least 2030. They say, quote, almost half of the decline will come from declining prices of EV raw materials such as lithium, nickel, and cobalt. The raw materials that make up batteries can be difficult and expensive to harvest and process, which has a huge impact on the overall price of the battery. At the same time, Tesla and other companies are making huge strides in battery material recycling. In 2023 alone, Tesla claims that they helped to recover enough battery materials to produce 43,000 rear-wheel drive Model Y vehicles. Battery components make up a huge portion of the total cost of the EV, so recycling and other cost-cutting initiatives can do a lot to make these cars and their batteries more affordable. Now, battery innovation is always accelerating, so while we're seeing costs come down, we're also seeing major advances that could help batteries in the next few years. Traditionally, EV battery packs are made using a wet electrode process, mixing active materials with solvents into a slurry that's then coated and dried. While reliable, this method is energy-hungry, costly, and has a larger impact on the environment due to solvent use and the massive infrastructure that's needed. Dry electrode technology, which is now gaining traction, could change everything in this regard. It skips the solvent stage entirely and eliminates drying, resulting in lower energy consumption, smaller factory footprints, and generally cheaper production. The main challenge so far has been maintaining performance and consistency at scale, but Tesla themselves may be turning a corner for this technology. They recently announced a first Cybertruck prototype built with dry cathode 4680 battery cells. If this becomes scalable, which we know that they're working towards, this process could reduce costs by 15 to 30%, slash energy use tenfold, and make battery production cleaner and more efficient. Solid-state batteries, on the other hand, represent another major frontier. Unlike current lithium-ion batteries that use a liquid electrolyte, solid-state versions rely on a solid electrolyte, making them safer and theoretically capable of delivering far greater energy density, up to 10 times more in some designs. The big barrier here has been cost and durability. However, a lab in Maryland recently made headlines after cycling its new anode-less, compression-free design over 800 times, which is an important step toward commercial viability. Big companies like Toyota and Honda are already moving in on this technology, and Toyota has committed to producing solid-state batteries by 2028 with a projected range over 900 miles. Honda, on the other hand, plans to launch their own high-range versions later this decade, and then there's companies like Mercedes, Volkswagen, and NIO who are deep into R&D for this technology. The timeline here remains uncertain and is something that has been consistently pushed back over the years, but momentum seems to suggest that we're getting closer to viable solid-state batteries. At the same time, China's battery powerhouse CATL is setting new benchmarks. In April, the company unveiled next-gen battery packs guaranteed to last 15 years or nearly 1 million miles, and these are specifically engineered for heavy-use vehicles like buses and trucks. These packs reportedly endure 1,000 charging cycles with no capacity loss. CATL also released a 10-year, 621,000-mile version in tandem. If these claims do hold up, it's a transformative shift for commercial transport and possibly for personal EVs down the line. The company is also developing their own solid-state batteries and has committed to cutting the cost of LFP battery cells in half by the end of this year. Their aggressive innovation is helping push global prices down and forcing legacy automakers to adopt to technologies like this. Between dry electrode manufacturing, solid-state breakthroughs, and ultra-durable long lifespans, the future of EVs is essentially being rewritten in the next few years. So everything we've talked about could change a lot in the coming decades. What was once theoretical is quickly becoming real, so it will be exciting to see all of this stuff enter production. For people that either own or are interested in EVs, one of the biggest concerns has always been longevity. Fully electric cars are still very new in the grand scheme of things, and there was a lot we didn't know about how they would work in the long term. In addition to normal concerns, it didn't help that there were a lot of outlets that published or promoted nothing but stories of faulty batteries and expensive repairs. To some degree, that does make sense. All of those problems did happen, and at the same time, nobody writes an article when their cars just work like they're supposed to. However, some of the press has undoubtedly created a negative perception of EVs in some people's minds that isn't fully warranted. However, for the last several years now, Tesla and many other manufacturers have proven themselves time and time again in the real world. The facts are clear that EVs on average will far outlast almost any equivalent ICE vehicle. At the same time, all of the ongoing advancements in battery tech mean that each new generation of vehicle will be better and more long-lasting than the last. This is an extremely exciting, trailblazing era for this technology, and we are seeing history be made all around us. As it stands right now, breaking 200,000 miles should definitely be achievable for most Tesla owners, and 300,000 miles is also within the realm of possibility. It may not be long, though, until we see these cars drive distances that today might seem impossible. That's all for this video today, but in the meantime, if you're interested in hearing the latest Tesla news, you can check out that video linked up here or in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.